There were only about 5 brothers there. They were real gems, just like you are here tonight. People who love Jehovah God. People who are 100% for righteousness and desire to put into practice good principles. And there were those 5, and Brother Mike, who had come up from Cairo to work for the Libyan government, he told me as he was flying over Tripoli, he said he bowed his head in prayer to Jehovah God, and he said, Jehovah, if there are any of your little sheep down there, please let me find them. Because if I don't, I'm going to be one sheep that's going to be very, very lonely. And so it was Mike that was instrumental. God used to find these 5 gems. Oh, there were a few more associated, but they were not like those 5. Because soon afterwards they left. Well, these 5 had been working, and of course we gave them more instructions as the society instructs us to do, and it began to grow. This is Jehovah's Day, and it has to grow. One night they were having an area book study just a little bit outside the metropolitan part of the city of Tripoli. And here they were, and as soon as they had finished the study, they heard a very hard knock on the door, and the brothers just no sooner raised their heads from the prayer, and the sister went over to try to open the door, and as soon as she turned the knob, in rushed the police. And outside that house, there were 200 armed policemen. They had machine guns and rifles and pistols and I guess everything you can think of. If they could afford tanks down there, they'd have had those. But anyway, there they were. They were on the house and everywhere, all with their guns trained on that door. Now, what would have happened if our brothers would have been fearful in time of trouble? They would have been shot down, wouldn't they? So there was Mike and his wife, Lottie. They took the mattress off of their bed and they put it on the floor. They crawled under the blankets with a little flashlight, and they studied those back call names. Lottie would repeat them to her husband over and over and over again until they made new circuits in their mind so that they could recall them whenever they needed to know their names. And then they would tear the back call slips up in little teeny pieces, and they'd make frequent trips into the bathroom, throw them down into the toilet bowl, and of course pull the chain, and away they'd go. Well, when the chief of police came there in the morning, he was talking Arabic to the man outside, and Mike could understand Arabic. And he said, now, what's been going on that should be suspected in there? He said, nothing at all. Everything is fine. He said, the only thing is, I believe someone's sick. They just keep going to the bathroom every 15 minutes. Other than that, everything's fine. Well, you know how the world is. He just balled that man up one side and down the other. Just scolded him for all he could think of, called him a lot of bad names. Far different than the theocracy. When we make mistakes, we are counseled, but counseled with love, and we appreciate and we thank Jehovah God and the mature brother for counseling us. But not in the world. They don't know what love is, and of course that man didn't receive any. Well, he said, whatever had to be done is done, and so it's all over now. Well, I went down there to try to start something legal. The society wanted some information, and we couldn't get it, but I thought, well, I'll see what can be done, being that they sent me down. And so in the meantime, a brother had come into the truth, Brother Gus, who is a high official in the government of Libya. And so I said, Gus, if you ever have the opportunity of finding something out about that trouble, why, I'll deeply appreciate it, and of course, I'll tell it to the society, and then they'll take over from there. You know, they are interested in true worship. And he said, well, Francis, I'll do the best I can. It's a ticklish thing, but I'll do what I can. One day he was having coffee with a Secret Service man. And so, as the custom went, they were having their coffee after lunch in the outside cafes. And so he said, incidentally, to the Secret Service man, you remember that raid of all that trouble they had with these people they call themselves Jehovah's Witnesses? What in the world caused that? Well, he says, I'll tell you something. I'll tell you a secret if you keep it to yourself. He said to Brother Gus, don't tell anybody. And so, of course, Brother Gus says, you know me. And so the man told him, he said, well, the high clergyman of the Christian religion in the province of Tripoli, which is called Tripolitania, has gone to the governor of that province and told him that these people were against the Islam religion and they had tendencies of being communists and they were planning to overthrow the newly formed monarchy. But in the meantime, the work is going on, and the last time I'd been there, which was not too many weeks ago, there were 65 publishers now in Tripoli. There are 5 pioneers. 2 brothers were called to the Rome Bethel. 1 brother is now a circuit servant, and there is a special pioneer working right there in Tripoli. And you know how he works? He dresses up like a farmer. He's got an old straw hat. He carries a basket with him, and in that basket he has potatoes and carrots and so on. And he makes sure those carrot tops are sticking outside that basket, because the people are looking for Jehovah's Witnesses going door to door. And so when they see this man going to a door selling vegetables, well, then they quit peeking out the blinds or out the window, and they figure, well, the fellow's just selling some potatoes. But underneath those material things are the precious spiritual things. And when interest is worked up, he can place literature with those people. And he's doing very, very fine. In fact, his work is showing many good results. And I'm very, very happy to tell you that right now on the island of Malta, the first time that we know of since the Apostle Paul's day, and you know he was shipwrecked there is now a congregation established, and God's witness work is being done on that island. There are 13 publishers, and every one of those, or practically all of them, have been baptized in the bathtub of a brother's home, because of course it would be too obvious outside the house. And so the work is going on very nicely. And you'd be interested perhaps to know, well, now how do you do the work there? In different parts of the world, the work is carried on in different manners. Well, here at Malta, we went out in the witness work the first time. It was at 9 o'clock in the evening. And I took a brother with me. His name was Brother John Watkins. He had never been out in the work before. It was his first time. And of course, he was very nervous and excited. You know, most of the times when we went out, at least practically all of us, our first time, we thought when we rang the doorbell, a lion would come out the door. And so we're usually very frightened. But of course, after we're in the truth, just a few days of doing that, then we realize that the only thing that can come out are imperfect people. And they are usually very harmless. And so we went to the first door, and as we were going to the door, John says, Francis, how are we going to do this? And I said, well, John, you can say whatever you want when we get there. Just remember never to say the word Jehovah. Never mention the word Bible. And of course, don't say kingdom, because all Jehovah's Witnesses are identified by the word kingdom. They are the only ones preaching it. And different words such as that. Well, he says, Francis, I'll listen to you, and then I'll try to remember those things. So we rang the doorbell, and the man came out. He said, how do you do? And I said, good evening. My name is Mr. Francis Malaspina. I'm very lonely, my friend and I, John here. And we thought we'd just ring anybody's doorbell, and we'd like to talk to you. If you got a few minutes, well, we'd appreciate it. If you haven't, tell us. We'll go to somebody else's door. And he said, boy, this is the strangest visit I've ever had. So he said, come on in. So we went in, and on the way in, John was behind me and the man was in front of me, and so I looked over at John and he went, as much as to say, I guess anything can happen. And so when I got in this house, the only thing I could see, and all there was in that house, were radios. That place was just full of radios. And I don't know a thing about radios. The only thing I know about a radio is you turn it on and bad news comes out. And so, of course, there I was, and we were talking about radios. You don't need any wires, and in comes the sound from nowhere, and so on. And first thing you know, we were talking about the universe. And this man's face got real red, and his eyes got real big, and he looked at me, and I thought, my gosh, this man's having a heart attack. And so I didn't know what to do. I never saw a man have one of those before, and he says, I know who you are. Well, I said, well, don't you remember? I said, I'm Mr. Malaspina. You don't know me, really. He said, no, you're one of those so-and-so Jehovah's Witnesses. Well, I thought, now, what word or words did I say for that man to know who I was? And I thought, now, everything is going to be spoiled. The brothers may have trouble here. And so I said, well, even if I were, so what? And he says, well, 7 years ago, I made a vow that the next Jehovah's Witness that would come to my door, I would shoot him. And I thought, what a place to die. Well, anyway, I'm here, so I don't have to tell you how I got out of there. He didn't shoot me, so that's the important thing anyway. Jehovah God is not forcing his gift of life upon anyone. If they want to die, well, that's very easy. In due time, they just lay down, and that's the end of them. As we went off to the next place to serve, it's the island of Sicily. I have a very, very warm spot in my heart for those Sicilian brothers. You know, those brothers work from the time the sun comes up until it goes down for 300 lira a day. You know how much that is in your money? 47 cents. Well, anyway, when you arrive in that place to serve those brothers, and the congregation sets up on the highest mountain, not hill, but mountain in that area. Sicily is very mountainous. And there in that, those brothers are at the train station to meet you. And, of course, when you get off the train, they're very happy to see you. And the way you go up in the mountains, and there's no way of getting up there except by walking. And it takes 3.5 hours before you get to the top of that mountain of steady walking in the trails. And there are all these brothers with you. Of course, they want to carry your suitcases. They are very kind and considerate, and they know all the shortcuts in those trails and the way you go. And when a softy like me gets up there, I'm very tired, but those brothers are raring to go. And so up on the top of that mountain, there are all the brothers waiting for you. And it so happens that up there, there's something like 90 to 100 brothers. And they converge on the top of this mountain from all over that area. Some of them have walked for many hours to get there. There would be that coffee and fresh bread. Real fresh, oven fresh. And so I asked the congregation servant, I said, Emilio, where's that bread coming from? He says, oh, my wife gets up a little bit early and she goes and gets it. Goes and gets it where? It takes 3.5 hours just to come up from there. He says, no, she doesn't go there, Francis. She goes 2 hours away. 2 hours going, 2 hours coming back. Before she goes, she does all the chores in the house. They're farmers. Those of you who have lived on a farm, you know that it isn't just getting up, jumping in the car, and you're off to work. Now, that was real love, wasn't it? And so I said, well, she shouldn't do that. He says, well, if you take that privilege away from her, she'll probably cry till you come back here next time. And there she was doing that every single morning. And talk about how love is expressed in a humble and genuine way. When we arrive there, those brothers, sometimes they have one big bowl on the table, and it's filled with spaghetti, and everybody just digs out of that bowl. They all eat out of that bowl. Well, now, when we were there, we could notice it was very obvious. There was a clean new plate and a brand new fork. That fork was probably something you pick up in the 5 and 10 cent store, but it was new, and it was the best they could afford. And it just makes you choke up and tears come in your eyes to think of the love those brothers have for you, to do things like that. You know they've spent their 47 cents easily just for that new fork, and they could never afford it. And there they'll sit and watch you eat, watch every move you make while you're sitting there. And then, of course, one sister came up after a talk to express her love to us. And she says, well, Brother Francis, I got something for you. And I said, sister, you got something for me. I should be giving something to you. I have more than you have. Always have had more than you got. And I don't want anything you have to offer me. And so she said, well, I really feel bad about this now because I've already got it. So I could see she was deeply hurt. And so I said, well, sister, okay, give it to me, but you understand why I didn't want it. And so from now on, don't do that for any of the brothers that come here because they are taken care of. You know what she had? She had a bundle of fresh peas. Well, that's not very much. They're about 23 cents a box over here in the market. But to that sister, she undoubtedly went to her landowner, and her landowner, beyond any doubt, ridiculed her, probably saying, why, those Americans got more than you'll ever have, and here you're giving up your wages for those peas for that guy. Can't you see he's even dressed better than you are? But anyway, she had to pick the peas, and she had to shuck the peas. She even cooked those peas for Gloria and I. And then she had the biggest treat of sitting there, and that was our supper for that night after the visit was over. We had a bowl of peas apiece with some olive oil and some black pepper. And that sister was sitting right here where Sister Halvagen is sitting, watching us and tears in her eyes of joy just because she could give us something and express her love to us for what we had brought in that congregation. In other words, for the society and the organization. Now, isn't that wonderful? Doesn't that make you feel good to know that we are associated with this organization that is just overabounding in love and good works? People who are genuine. People who are going to be our friends forever. And doesn't it make you feel good that if you can make progress and continue in the Lord's service faithfully and always doing the best you possibly can, that Jehovah God is going to give you friends like that forever? Where could you ever go, brothers? What organization could you ever associate with or have associated with where you find that quality of people, even though they are poor? They are certainly rich in love, and they express it to you. And that's what makes those assignments so good. You are the same kind of people here. You are no different than they are. If you aren't, then of course, as the Apostle Paul says, re-examine yourself to see whether you are in the faith. It has to be that way. One night I had gone to bed about 11:30. Here we were on the top of this mountain. And about 10 minutes to 3 in the morning, I heard a voice. Brother Francis. I thought, I must be dreaming. And so I nudged Gloria, my wife, and I said, say, what time is it? Isn't it 3 o'clock? Do I hear a voice? Could it be I'm dreaming? What is it? And she says, no, I hear it too. And I said, who is it? And he said, it's me, Emilio, the congregation servant. Well, I thought someone got hurt. And he said, I says, what do you want, Emilio? He says, it's time to go in the service. Well, I thought, I guess I could be wrong. I'm way up here in this mountain. Perhaps the sun takes its time in getting over this mountain. That's why it's dark. Or my watch is stopped. Something's wrong. Surely don't go into work at 3 o'clock. So I went downstairs, and as I was having this coffee, I said to the brother there, there were a whole flock of brothers, all had little teeny lanterns, kerosene lanterns. And I said, incidentally, what time is it? And the congregation servant, he pulled out his timepiece, and he said, well, brother, it's a little bit after 3. We better get going. So I says, where in the world are we going? And he said, well, by the time we get in our territory, Brother Francis, it'll be 3.5 hours from now. And he says another thing, if the neighbors know that we are going out and they know you're here, word's been spread all through the mountains, they know you're here, they're going to go ahead of us and they'll mob us out of the little sections where we go to do the witness work. And so we have to go ahead of them. And so we read the text and asked the Lord's blessing, and away we went. And you could hear those brothers, you know, you go single file because it's very dangerous in those mountains. All these lanterns, and you just have a great big contact point. They all come out, and here you go you see all these brothers, and they're singing kingdom songs in Italian, and it sounds so nice. And of course, as the day breaks, you ask some questions to find out little things about the brothers, where you can help them and so on. And so the brothers will say, you see that mountain over there, Brother Malaspina? Yes. Well, see the one behind it, and you can just barely see it. I have a back call over there. How long does it take you to get there? Oh, about 5 hours, he says very apologetically, trying to justify himself. At least he feels that way. And he says, well, you know, I'd go every week, but I can only go every 2 weeks. Because see this mountain over here? I got another call there, which is only a couple hours away, so I make that regularly. Is that all right? Now, doesn't that make us think, you know, here in America, we really are blessed to have things to help us in the Lord's service. You ever have that feeling it's such a big job to jump into the old Cadillac and step on the starter? And it's a real cold morning, and my gosh, to get over there, oh, well, it'll only be the congregation servant, and the servant's just the same old few. Besides, I'm kind of tired this morning, I'll sleep in. You ever feel that way? Would you get up at 3 o'clock in the morning with all those obstacles? You should, and I'm sure you would. Or on your back calls. Have you ever perhaps thought, well, now I placed the literature with that person. When you placed the literature, you marked down, call back, very nice. And then when it came time to make the back call, well, you know, that lady acted kind of funny in there. I don't know whether I should make that call or not. Besides, gosh, it's a long ways over there. It takes me about 5 minutes with a car. You know, those things actually happen, don't they? Sure they do. We are brothers and sisters, and so, of course, we learn from babes in the truth sometimes. Then, brothers, we have to face it. We may be falling away to materialism, and we may lose out. Well, we were out in a desert town one time, just to give you an idea how the work goes on there. It's not as comfortable as it is here, but, of course, we're glad that it is here, as comfortable as it is, that is. But in those places, it's a little bit different. I remember one time, Gloria and I and some people of goodwill, we finished having a study with them and a back call. We stayed overnight there because you can only get there one day and then come back the next. It was way out in the desert, and so they let us stay in their house, and we had dinner with these people. They asked us if we'd like to have some soup. And I thought, boy, I certainly would. It's been a long time since I had a nice bowl of soup. And so we said, all right. And the brother, this person of goodwill, who's now a brother, incidentally, he said, would you like to say a prayer? And I said, I certainly will. And so we bowed our heads, and I wasn't used to the atmosphere in that part of the country yet. And we bowed our heads in prayer, and when we lifted our heads, we found that in our soup they were just full of flies. And I wondered, now what do they do with this soup? So I kept watching over the rim of my glasses, and I noticed that they would just pick them out with a spoon and throw them on the floor. So I thought, well, if you're going to have any soup, Francis, you better pick them out. So I picked them out, too, and we had the soup. I didn't even notice whether it changed the flavor or not. I'm still here. So really it isn't too bad if sometimes we get a fly in our soup. And talk about getting to meetings. A sister came to me and said, Brother Francis, I want to say goodbye. I'm going home. And I said, Sister, there's just a half-hour talk, and then it's all over for the entire week. Where are you going? Why don't you stay? You've stayed all the time. And she says, Brother Francis, I'm 72 years old. And there she was, a little thin sister, very sick. You could just see it. And she says, well, when I get home, everybody's against me. You read in the latest experiences there at Rome how they beat the women there and so on. The husbands are like brute beasts and so on. Well, this sister said, when I get home, they'll probably lock me out. I'll be outside all night long. If they let me in, my husband's liable to beat me till I'm black and blue. And you'll see people come to the meetings with their eyes cut and so on. They'll be sitting there just like these sisters are here. And after the meeting, I'd go up and talk to some of them. And they'd say, well, my husband did that because he doesn't want me to attend. But there she'd be, sitting there. And so this little old sister said, by the time I get home, 4 or 5 hours will have passed. So really, I better be going, because it'll be midnight before I get there at least. But every step of the way, I'll be so happy thinking of you brothers over there and what you might be talking about, and I'll be praying for Jehovah's blessing to be with you, and you do the same for me. Well, I didn't say any more, of course not. But isn't that something, the way they appreciate the meetings? And there that sister went with her little lantern, said goodbye, and away she went. Well, that makes us appreciate what it means to come to the meetings. This is the place where God's Spirit is given to all of us. It was God's will that you came here tonight, not because of me, but because the congregation called a congregational meeting. And here you are. And you will receive countless blessings for your obedience. I'd just like to tell you a couple things now about the priests there. Priests are as common as they can be there. They're all over the place. And so he says, one of these days I'm going to die. And when I die, I'm going to stay dead. You are the true Christians, and I wish you the victory. Well, we thought, gee, that's a real good expression. That man should be helped. It wasn't just but 2 or 3 days later he was doing the same thing he had done before. Mistreating the brothers. Well did Isaiah prophesy of those kind of people. They honor God with their lips, and their corrupt hearts are far removed from him. And that's just the way it was in that individual case. This same priest, when he knows that there are some of the sisters in the town going door to door, he'll get on his bicycle. Everyone has a bike over there. And he'll go down the street and he'll make remarks at the sisters. He'll say words like, hello there, prostitute. Words like that. Or, hi, baby. Only in Italian, of course. Anything to anger the sisters so that he can bring some legal action against them. Well, that's the kind of people that the devil's using, of course. If he's setting an example for what his organization has taught him in all the years he's been a priest, we know exactly what kind of an organization he belongs to. Because that's the fruits of something that is not Christian. And not too far away from there, there's a brother he's a young brother, 28 years old. He's already had one arm amputated, handbags, puts it around his back, and up in the mountains he goes, knocking on everybody's doors. They've already stoned him out of one village, and he still works those towns. And we had the privilege of working with him. And he was telling us one day, he has a brother who's a priest down here in El Salvador. And this brother came over to Italy to visit him and his family. And he said one day a discussion arose, and of course the brother defended the Bible. And he put this brother, who is a priest, with his back against the wall and embarrassed him because he was not telling the truth. And so that night this priest brother told his fleshly brother, I don't want you ever to do that to me again, or I'll just denounce you. I'll disown you as a brother. With you, you've embarrassed me before the villagers. And so the brother said, now, wasn't that the Bible truth? Wasn't it speaking of what was right? The thing that you have dedicated your life to? He said, I know. Your kind of people are also in America. I want nothing to do with it. That's not my goal, so forget about it. Well, this clergyman came back to America, and in the meantime, his mother died. And so the clergyman had other brothers and sisters of his fleshly ties, and so he sent money to our brother in the truth to cover the funeral expenses. And in the letter, he said to that brother, amongst other things, I'm sending you the money to cover the funeral expenses because I can trust you. Those of his own religion he couldn't trust, and they were of his own family, the one he hated the most. He knew that man was an honest man, so he too, his heart is far removed from Almighty God. So then, that's all we have time for tonight. We could go on and on. But I would like to say that those brothers told me before I left, they said, Francesco, dargli un bacio per me. You know what that means? It says, Francis, when you get over there, give them a kiss for us. You know, it's the custom over there for the men to kiss each other when they leave. Don't worry, I'm not going to kiss you brothers. So But anyway, so in closing, I'd like to say to you, I'd like to just read you this scripture. It's found here at Psalms 119. They that fear thee will be glad when they see me, because I have hoped in thy word. That's setting a good example, isn't it? So as the brothers told me, I'm going to tell you. May Jehovah God bless you forever and ever. Thank you.
I want to thank you, Brother Malaspina, for these wonderful experiences. We all enjoyed them, and certainly Jehovah has blessed your efforts